The message appeared on my phone at exactly 8:17 p.m. Congratulations to Ethan and Olivia on their engagement. For a second, I thought it had to be a mistake. I stared at the photo until my eyes filled with tears. Ethan was smiling, his arm around another woman, showing off the ring I had spent months helping him save for. Just 3 nights earlier, he had kissed my forehead, looked me in the eyes, and promised, "Give me a little more time. Our future is almost here." That future had vanished overnight. No goodbye, no honest conversation, no explanation. Just a picture that told me I had already been replaced. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends kept asking if I had known. Some were sending fake sympathy. Others were already gossiping about how quickly Ethan had moved on. I wanted to scream. I wanted answers. Instead, I sat alone on the kitchen floor, wondering how 5 years of love could disappear without a single warning. Then another message arrived. This one was from Ethan. "Please don't make this harder than it already is. This is what's best for everyone." Best for everyone? I read those words again and again until they no longer hurt. They made me angry. If I had meant so little to him, why had he spent years making promises he never planned to keep? What secret had he been hiding while I was busy planning our future? That night, I made one promise to myself. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't chase him, and I definitely wouldn't let the people who watched my heart break decide how my story ended, because one day, the man who replaced me overnight would learn something he never expected. Some mistakes don't disappear with time, they wait, and when regret finally arrives, it never comes alone. Looking back now, the hardest part isn't remembering how he left me, it's remembering how deeply I trusted him before he did. My name is Claire, and for 5 years, Ethan wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my best friend, my safe place, and the person I imagined growing old with. We met in the marketing department of a small company. I was the quiet new employee trying not to make mistakes, and Ethan was the funny guy who somehow knew everyone's name. On my first day, when I spilled coffee all over my desk, everyone laughed except him. He grabbed a stack of paper towels, smiled, and said, "Don't worry, now everyone will remember you." That was the beginning. We started eating lunch together, staying late after work, and taking long walks before going home. It all happened so naturally that neither of us noticed when friendship became love. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We rented a small apartment with old wooden floors that creaked every time someone walked across them. The kitchen was tiny, and the bedroom window refused to close properly in winter. Still, we loved that place because it was where we built our dreams together. Every Friday night, we ordered cheap takeout, watched old movies, and talked about the future. Ethan always said, "One day we'll laugh about these days from a house that's actually ours." I believed him. Whenever money was tight, we encouraged each other instead of complaining. I even worked extra freelance projects at night so we could save for our future. Ethan thanked me every single time, promising that every sacrifice would be worth it. His family welcomed me like I already belonged. His mother often joked that I was the daughter she never had, and even his father would ask when we were finally getting married. Every smile, every hug, every promise made me believe our future was already written. Then, about 6 months before everything fell apart, something changed. At first, it was so small that I ignored it. Ethan started working late more often. His phone, once left on the table without a second thought, was suddenly always face down. If I asked who was texting him, he'd smile and say, "Just work." I wanted to believe him. Love makes you trust even when your heart whispers that something isn't right. Then a new employee joined the company. Her name was Olivia. She was confident, stylish, and seemed to fit into the office immediately. Everyone liked her, including Ethan. I noticed they laughed together during meetings, but I pushed the thought away. After all, people were allowed to have friends. One evening, I surprised Ethan at work with his favorite coffee. As I walked into the office, I saw him standing near the conference room. Olivia was laughing. Ethan was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. The moment he noticed me, his smile disappeared. "Oh, Claire," he said, sounding more surprised than happy to see me. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I was interrupting something I wasn't supposed to see. He quickly introduced us, thanked me for the coffee, and hurried me out, saying he still had an important meeting. I told myself I was overthinking. I kept repeating the same excuse all the way home. If he didn't love me, he wouldn't have spent 5 years with me. I had no idea that while I was protecting our relationship with trust, he was already building a new future without me. The next few weeks felt strange. Ethan was still living with me, but it no longer felt like we were sharing the same life. He left for work earlier than usual and came home later every night. The little things that once made us happy disappeared one by one. Friday movie nights became canceled plans. Our long conversations turned into short replies. Even when we sat in the same room, it felt like there was an invisible wall between us. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he gave the same answer. "I'm just tired. Work has been stressful." I wanted to believe him because trusting him was easier than facing the truth. Then came the night that changed everything. It was our 5th anniversary. I had spent the entire week planning a surprise dinner. I cooked every dish he loved, bought a small chocolate cake from the bakery near our apartment, and even wore the blue dress he once told me was his favorite. The apartment looked warm and beautiful. Candles flickered across the dining table. Soft music played in the background. I checked the clock again. 7 o'clock, then 8, then 9. Every passing minute made the silence feel heavier. Finally, my phone buzzed. For a brief second, I smiled, thinking Ethan was about to tell me he was on his way home. Instead, the message read, "Something came up. Don't wait for me." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just 8 cold words. I stared at the screen, hoping another message would appear. Nothing did. The food slowly turned cold. The candles burned out one by one. By midnight, I packed everything into the refrigerator and quietly went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I heard the front door open. Ethan walked inside, trying not to make any noise. When he saw me sitting awake in the living room, he froze. "You waited up?" he asked. I looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You forgot our anniversary." He rubbed the back of his neck without meeting my eyes. "I told you. Work got busy." Then I noticed something that made my heart sink. There was a faint perfume on his jacket. It wasn't mine. I didn't accuse him. I didn't scream. I simply asked the question I had been afraid to ask for weeks. "Are you seeing someone else?" For the first time since we had met, Ethan stayed silent. That silence answered everything. A few seconds later, I didn't plan for this to happen. Those words shattered something inside me. "So it's true?" He slowly nodded. "There isn't an easy way to say this." I felt my hands shaking. "Who is she?" He closed his eyes for a moment before whispering the name I already knew. "Olivia." The room suddenly felt too small to breathe. Every late night, every canceled dinner, every hidden message, every strange excuse. It all made sense. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. I laughed through my tears. "You already did." He tried to explain that he had been confused, that he hadn't meant for things to go this far, that he still cared about me, but every word sounded emptier than the one before. Then he said something I will never forget. "I think she's the future I want." The man who had spent 5 years promising me forever had replaced me in just a few weeks. I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and brought back the small wooden box that held the engagement ring we had chosen together months earlier. I placed it gently on the table between us. "You should give this to her," I said. Ethan looked shocked. "Claire, no," I interrupted, wiping away my tears. "Don't make promises to 2 women at the same time." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was louder than any argument. He picked up a small suitcase, walked to the front door, and paused with his hand on the handle. "I'm sorry. I didn't answer, because some apologies arrived too late to mean anything. The door closed behind him, and just like that, 5 years of memories disappeared into the quiet night. I thought losing Ethan would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The real heartbreak was waiting for me the very next morning. The next morning, I woke up hoping the last 12 hours had been a nightmare. The apartment was painfully quiet. Ethan's side of the closet was empty. His toothbrush was gone. Even his favorite coffee mug had disappeared. It was real. I somehow found the strength to get dressed and go to work. Sitting alone at home would only make the pain worse. The moment I walked into the office, I felt it. People stopped talking. A few looked away. Others gave me that uncomfortable smile people wear when they know something you don't. My heart started racing. Then I heard someone whisper, "That's her." Another voice answered, "She still doesn't know everything." I wanted to turn around and ask them what they meant, but I kept walking. When I reached my desk, my closest coworker, Mia, quietly placed a cup of coffee beside me. "You okay?" she asked. I forced a smile. "I will be." She hesitated before speaking again. "Claire, there's something you deserve to know." I looked at her. "What is it?" Mia lowered her voice. "Ethan and Olivia, they've been seeing each other for months." Months. The word hit me harder than anything Ethan had said the night before. "No," I whispered. "He told me it just happened." Mia slowly shook her head. "I wish that were true." She explained that people around the office had noticed them getting closer almost 6 months earlier. They stayed late together even when no work was left. They went to lunch almost every day. Some coworkers had even seen them having dinner together after work. No one told me because they believed Ethan would eventually do the right thing. He never did. I sat there in complete silence. Every memory from the past 6 months suddenly looked different. Every business meeting, every canceled date, every late-night text. They had never been about work. Maya reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. "I've been trying to decide whether to give you this." Inside was a copy of an invitation, a private engagement celebration, Ethan and Olivia. The date froze me in place. It was planned almost 3 weeks before he ended our relationship. That meant, while he was still kissing me goodbye, every morning, he was already planning a future with someone else. I couldn't understand how someone could smile in your face while quietly preparing to leave. As I stared at the invitation, another thought crossed my mind. This wasn't just about falling in love with someone else. It had all been carefully planned. That evening, I returned to the apartment to collect the few things Ethan had left behind. While cleaning a drawer in his old desk, I found a folded notebook page. At first, I thought it was another work note. Then I recognized Ethan's handwriting. It was a list: apartment lease, shared savings, furniture, car insurance. Next to each item, he had written who would keep it after the breakup. My hands began to shake. He hadn't decided to leave overnight. He had organized every detail long before he looked me in the eyes and said he loved me. The betrayal wasn't the relationship with Olivia. It was the months of pretending, the fake smiles, the empty promises, the plans he let me make, knowing he would never be there to see them happen. For the first time since he walked away, my tears stopped. Not because the pain was gone, because something inside me had changed. I finally understood that chasing answers would never bring back the person I thought I loved. That man no longer existed. I folded the paper, placed it back on the desk, picked up my keys, and walked out of the apartment for the last time. As I locked the door, I whispered one sentence to myself. One day, he'll realize exactly what he threw away. I didn't know when that day would come. But for the first time since my world fell apart, I wasn't thinking about getting him back. I was thinking about getting my life back. The first few weeks were the hardest. Every morning, I woke up expecting to hear Ethan making coffee in the kitchen. For a split second, everything felt normal. Then reality would hit me all over again. He was gone. The apartment no longer felt like home, so I packed my clothes, a few books, and the photo albums I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't fancy. The walls were plain, the furniture was old, and the windows looked out at a busy street instead of a peaceful park. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I was building a life that didn't depend on someone else's promises. I made one decision that surprised everyone. I stopped talking about Ethan. Whenever friends asked how I was doing, I simply smiled and said, "I'm getting there." Some people expected me to post sad quotes online or complain about what had happened. I didn't. I quietly unfollowed Ethan and Olivia on every social media account. I deleted old photos from my phone, boxed up the gifts he had given me, and donated the things I no longer needed. It wasn't because I hated him. It was because I was tired of carrying a past that refused to let me move forward. Work became my escape. Instead of rushing home after the office, I stayed late to learn new skills. I took online business classes at night and volunteered for projects that everyone else avoided. My manager noticed the change and slowly began trusting me with bigger responsibilities. One afternoon, she called me into her office. "I've been watching your work," she said with a smile. "You've become one of the most reliable people on this team." A month later, I received my first promotion. It wasn't a huge raise, but it meant something far more important. For the first time since the breakup, I felt proud of myself. Life was slowly changing. I joined a weekend photography club, something I had always wanted to do but never made time for. Every Saturday morning, I walked through parks and city streets with strangers who quickly became friends. They didn't know my story, and that felt strangely comforting. Around them, I wasn't the woman who got replaced. I was just Claire. One evening, after a long day at work, I stopped at my favorite coffee shop. As I waited for my order, I overheard two familiar voices behind me. I turned around. It was Ethan and Olivia. Neither of them had noticed me yet. They looked happy. For a second, the old pain returned. Then I noticed something different. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even jealous. I simply realized they were no longer my future. Just as I picked up my coffee to leave, Ethan looked up. Our eyes met. His smile disappeared instantly. He took a small step toward me. "Claire, wait." I paused but didn't move closer. He looked nervous, almost like he didn't know what to say. "You look different," he said. I smiled politely. People change. Before he could say another word, I wished them a good evening and walked away. I didn't look back. For the first time since he left me, I wasn't walking away because I was heartbroken. I was walking toward a life that finally belonged to me. And although I didn't know it yet, that quiet confidence would soon become something Ethan could never forget. People often think revenge is loud. They imagine angry arguments, public fights, or dramatic speeches. But I learned something very different. The strongest revenge is becoming someone your past can never reach again. A few months after my promotion, my manager offered me a chance to lead an important project. It was risky, and many people believed I wasn't experienced enough. I accepted without thinking twice. For weeks, I arrived before everyone else and stayed long after the office lights had started turning off. I studied every report, asked questions, and refused to quit. Even when the pressure felt overwhelming, the project became a success. Soon, clients started asking for me by name. That was when another opportunity appeared. A former client approached me with an idea. "You've helped grow other people's businesses," he said. "Why not build one of your own?" The thought scared me. Starting a business meant leaving the safety of my job. It meant taking a risk with the little savings I had. But then I remembered something. The day Ethan left, I had promised myself that my future would never depend on another person's choices again. So I took the chance. The beginning wasn't easy. There were days when I worked from sunrise until midnight. My apartment became my office. The dining table was covered with notebooks, contracts, and empty coffee cups. Some weeks, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Then my first big client signed a contract. A month later, another followed. Slowly, my small business began to grow. A year passed faster than I expected. One morning, as I looked through a business magazine in a coffee shop, I froze. There was a photo of my company. Right below it was a short article about young entrepreneurs making a difference in the industry. For the first time in years, my name wasn't connected to heartbreak. It was connected to success. I smiled, folded the magazine, and went back to work. Life had finally become peaceful. Then, one afternoon, my assistant walked into my office. "Claire," she said, "there's a company requesting a meeting. They want to discuss a long-term partnership." She handed me the folder. The moment I saw the company logo, my heart skipped. It was the same company where Ethan still worked. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the folder. Life had a strange sense of timing. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately. Another part reminded me why I had worked so hard. This wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was business. So I agreed to the meeting. 3 days later, I walked into the conference room wearing a navy blue suit and carrying years of hard-earned confidence. Several executives stood to greet me. Then the conference room door opened one more time. Ethan walked in. The color drained from his face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked from me to the company logo on my presentation and back again, as if trying to understand how the woman he had walked away from was now sitting on the opposite side of the negotiation table. One executive smiled proudly. "Ethan, you've met Claire before, haven't you?" He swallowed hard. "Yes." I smiled politely. "It's good to see you again." The meeting began. I stayed calm, professional, and completely focused on the business proposal. I didn't mention our past. I didn't ask personal questions. I treated him exactly the way I treated everyone else in the room. By the end of the presentation, the executives were impressed. They wanted to move forward with the partnership. As everyone started leaving, Ethan quietly stepped toward me. "I never imagined," he began. I gently closed my laptop and looked at him. Neither did I. There was nothing more to say, because in that moment, I finally understood something. My revenge had never been about making Ethan feel small. It was about proving to myself that the woman he left behind no longer existed. She had become someone stronger, someone happier, someone completely beyond his reach. And judging by the look in his eyes, he had finally realized exactly what he had lost. After the meeting, I expected life to go back to normal. Instead, it seemed like the past had finally decided to catch up with both of us. A week later, our companies officially signed the partnership agreement. It was one of the biggest contracts my business had ever received. My team celebrated with coffee, laughter, and a small cake in the office. For me, it wasn't just another business deal. It was proof that the worst day of my life had quietly led me to one of the best. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. "Hi, Claire, it's Ethan. I was wondering if we could talk, just once." I stared at the screen for a moment before locking my phone. I didn't reply. Some conversations belong in the past. Over the next few weeks, similar messages appeared every now and then. "I owe you an apology. Please give me 5 minutes. There's something you deserve to know." I ignored every one of them, not because I hated him, because I had finally learned to protect my peace. Then one afternoon, Mia called me. "You won't believe what's happening," she said. "What is it?" "Ethan and Olivia broke up." I was silent. Maya continued. "People at the office say they were arguing for months. Olivia accepted a job in another city and left last week. She didn't even ask Ethan to go with her. For a moment, I remembered the night. Ethan told me she was the future he wanted. Life had answered that promise in its own way. "I thought you should know," Mia said gently. "Thanks," I replied. After hanging up, I sat quietly in my office. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I simply felt free. A few evenings later, I was leaving work when someone called my name. "Claire." I turned around. Ethan was standing near the entrance. his hands in his pockets. He looked different, not older, just tired. The confidence he once carried so easily had faded. "I know you don't want to see me," he said, "but please, just listen." I looked at my watch. "You have 5 minutes," he nodded. "I've replayed everything in my head 1,000 times," he admitted. "I kept telling myself I made the right choice. But every time I saw what you've built, I realized I wasn't chasing a better future." He lowered his eyes. I was running away from the person who believed in me the most. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked at me again. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. Years ago, hearing those words would have meant everything. Now, they meant almost nothing. I smiled. Not with pride, but with peace. "Ethan," I said softly, "the hardest part wasn't that you left." He frowned. "It was that you stopped being honest long before you walked away." His eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, I know. And, is there any chance we could start over?" I shook my head gently. "You miss the woman I used to be." I took one step back. "But she needed to be heartbroken to become the woman standing in front of you today." For the first time, Ethan didn't try to change my mind. He simply nodded. As I walked toward my car, I heard him say one last sentence. "I hope you're happy." Without turning around, I smiled. "I already am." I drove away, watching him grow smaller in my rearview mirror. Some people believe karma is about watching others lose everything. But real karma is something much quieter. It's realizing that the person you took for granted found happiness without you, and that is a loss no apology can ever fix. I thought that would be the last time I ever saw Ethan. I was wrong. A few weeks later, fate brought us together one final time, and that meeting would close the last unfinished chapter of our story.